This episode is brought to you by SteelRoot, a national leader in helping companies meet cybersecurity compliance requirements and prepare for CMMC. Their experienced team of engineers and consultants assist organizations of all sizes to implement and manage IT systems that meet the technical requirements in DFARS and CMMC. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of 123 CMMC. My name is Dana Mantilia, and I will be your host. And today, our guest is Jonathan Lightfoot. Hello, Jonathan. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do and who you are?
Sure. My name is Jonathan Lightfoot. I've been in IT for over 30 years. So if I count my military time as well as my time at corporate, about a little over 30 years. Currently, I am the Director of Assessment and IT Services for Symbiont Incorporated. That is a 36-year-old family-owned and operated and run business. The family part, my grandfather started the business back in 1985, and then my father ran it, and now I am preparing to take over the role. And we are government contractors, so we've been doing government contracts, federal, state, and local, since our inception in 1985. We've done a lot of work with DoD. As I tell people, if you could think of a federal agency, we've done work in it, all the way up to and including the White House, where we actually recabled the West Wing and the Oval Office and everything. So we've been around the block when it comes to dealing with government contracts. Right now, my focus has been more into helping companies with CMMC, getting them ready and prepared for the assessments. As you know, November 4th, there were a lot of changes that they made, taking it from 5 to 3 systems. I think it was some good changes were put in there, made it a little more accessible, especially to small businesses. But still, we're now helping a lot of small businesses with their NIST 800-171 certification. And that's just about it so far about me.
That's pretty good. That's a lot. So that's fantastic. Congratulations on all that. That's great. All right. So today we're going to talk about corporate governance and cybersecurity. So this is a very important thing. And I think this happens all throughout the country. Most boards of directors are not IT savvy. You know, they're business people, but they're not IT savvy. So what part do they play in the cybersecurity efforts within the organization?
This is a very interesting question. And you're right. A lot of the board of directors, they do have a business or a finance or accounting background or even sales, but not a lot of board members are IT savvy. And it's interesting when you look at the government regulations, when I talk about this around government contractors, the guidance coming from NIST actually says, we don't expect board of directors to be IT savvy. We don't expect boards of directors to start recruiting IT people onto their boards, but they do expect them to have knowledge or access to knowledge, I should say. Either it's internal to the company where you might be working with your CISO, or even going outside the organization and going to other organizations that do have that technology to help inform them.
Mm-hmm. So they do have a responsibility. So, yeah. Okay. So what makes cybersecurity a governance issue?
Well, when you think about cybersecurity, I mean, we've all been through the courses and read the books and everything, and they talk about risk. And that's all that we're talking about when you're at the board level is what kind of risk do you have? Mm-hmm. So when you're looking at a board, they are concentrating on the risk to the business. And as we've seen in recent months, even weeks, there's a lot of organizations that are being attacked, hacked, compromised in some way, and it's affecting the bottom line. And board of directors are looking at cybersecurity now as, hey, this is a really big attack surface we have here for our risk. So now what can we do to, what boards do? How do we reduce that risk? How do we mitigate the risk? Or how much are we willing to take and all? When you look at it from a business perspective, I know I do a lot of talk with CMMC and what DoD is requiring of government contractors especially. But if you look on the business side, insurance companies are also looking at this cybersecurity thing, right? So they're actually saying, hey, I remember when I started my business separate from Symbiont years ago, getting cybersecurity insurance was easy. It's a little checkbox. I checked it and maybe I paid an extra $50 a month or whatever for that so-called security, right? Mm-hmm. But now, if you look at the Colonial Pipeline issue, what happened with them, a lot of people don't realize this, but the insurance company did pay that ransom to get their systems back. Now, luckily, the federal government, FBI, they were able to go back and they clawed back a lot of that money. However, insurance companies are taking notes saying, hey, look, if you all get attacked, you're going to come to us expecting us to take on that risk. So now in my conversations with major business insurance providers, they're saying we're actually looking very seriously at cybersecurity. And there are questions that are going over to the board to say, what are you doing in these areas? And they're doing it for two reasons. Number one, will we insure you for that? Are we willing to partner with you and take on that risk? And secondly, how much are we going to charge you based on what cybersecurity operation you have? So when you look at all of that I've just put out there, boards of directors have a lot of responsibility and a lot of skin in the game, if you will, when it comes to cybersecurity these days.
Yeah, and the cyber liability insurance is completely different nowadays than it was even just a few years ago. You're right. It was just check the box and pay a little extra. You didn't even really have to tell them if you were doing anything. And now their companies, they're starting to realize with these ransomware attacks that the premiums are going to have to go up, and they're going to have to prove what are you doing to protect the company beforehand in case we do have a ransomware attack. But also, there's something else I wanted to say too. Oh, I know what it was, is that the board needs to acknowledge the reputational damage that could be done if there is some kind of a problem, a breach, a ransomware attack, something like that. And talk about that, because if they don't have any kind of incident response plan, then it's the Wild West when it happens. And, the board of directors does not want that happening if there is a situation, how is it even being handled, while it's going on. So in addition to putting it in the proactive stuff, looking at the insurance, and then also looking at, if there's something does happen, what's everybody got to do?
And you bring up a very valid point. Remember, the point of the board is there to protect the investors, right? Or the shareholders if it's a public company. So if there is a breach, and that's going to affect the bottom line, that's going to affect profit and revenue, that's something that the board's saying, hey, that affects the shareholders or the investors. So we have to make sure we're doing things so that if there is a breach, if something does go down, what are you going to do to, number one, get back up and running as quickly as possible? And number two, make sure this doesn't happen again at all. And when we have to go back to the investors, we're able to give them a positive answer of here's what's happened, here's what we're doing, here's how we're going to mitigate this for the future and all. Because again, a lot of these companies have investors. If the investors start feeling like, I'm not sure if this company is solid, right? They're going to do what? Pool their money and run, And I know that a lot of times I work with small to medium-sized businesses where they're not publicly traded, but they still have board of directors and they still have investors. It might be the owner of the company, for instance. And he or she may put in place a board of directors to say, I'm putting you in here to help, protect my investment. So when you look at the reputational risk, when you look at the profit risk, when you look at all the other different risks in there, and again, as I said at the beginning, risk, that is what the board is actually really concentrating on. And we're starting to see if they don't have like a cybersecurity group on the board, it's falling under audit, normally the audit committee. But I have started seeing companies are now putting in place, like they have actually a cybersecurity committee. So now we're starting to see boards are really concentrating on cybersecurity.
Well, that's good. And the other thing too, who wants to be the one that when there is something that happens, who wants to be the one that has to say to the investors when they ask, what were you doing before the breach to protect everything? Oh, well, we didn't really address that. So, that would be mortifying. So that's the other thing nobody wants to deal with. So.
We installed antivirus on the desktops. That's just not going to be good enough.
We thought we were good. Okay. So what role does the boardroom have when it comes to cybersecurity?
The boardroom leads from the top, right? Companies lead from the top. So when you think about the role, one of the things that boards are doing now, and it's actually being recommended by the Association of Board of Directors, is they're carving out portions of their minutes of their annual or quarterly meetings to actually talk about cybersecurity, currently setting the tone, if you will. We know that in the past, when cybersecurity, and I'm talking not even long ago, 5 years ago, right? Cybersecurity was for a lot of companies like, oh gosh, we got to deal with that. We don't really want to deal with that. Oh, we should get this, and they would have these great plans, but they weren't budgeted for it, right? Or they were under budget totally. Now with the boards, their roles are saying, hey, look, this is a board important topic. So now when the budgets are being formulated, we're starting to see, okay, cybersecurity is getting money. Cybersecurity is getting resources because this is a priority for the board of directors or coming out from the board. But also their role is, like I said at the beginning, leading from the top, making sure that they are insistent upon good cyber hygiene, we'll just call it that,
Mhm.
and in having that flow down and through and across the organization. So it isn't just the IT department or the QA department talking about it. This is something that the board has said, yeah, this is something that's important to us. Let's make sure everybody realizes that this is important, but also engendering that culture of this isn't just an IT problem.
Mhm.
This is a whole organization problem. And, when we're talking about NIST 800-171, one of the things that you'll notice is to get NIST certified or to be able to go through the self-evaluation, there are several non-IT departments that are a part of that.
Mhm.
You have HR, you have security, all these other departments are also have a part to play. And again, the role of the board leading from the top saying, hey, this is what we're going to do, and we need all hands on deck.
Mhm. Absolutely. And then making sure that it does become part of the culture, part of the everyday. And, you can put the basics in place and then build upon them. I think everybody is so overwhelmed by having to put in the absolute perfect plan. And, well, let's start doing something before, just put this whole entire huge thing. It's like, I'm going to start to become a runner, but I'm not going to go out and run 26 miles the first time I go to run. But at least if I go run a mile, I've done something, something is better than nothing in this situation.
And Dane, I'm sure you're familiar with what I'm about to say. How do you eat an elephant?
Exactly. One
One
bite
bite
at a time. Yep.
take this one little cut, let's start.
Yep, exactly. All right. What are some things that boards can do to put in place a culture of security in the organizations?
So, like I said earlier, making it an agenda item, making it so that there are, we're starting to see, for instance, CISOs are being invited to the board meetings, right, for presentations. We're starting to see directives coming straight out of the board for the annual goals, if you will, and even a part of their strategy, 5-year strategy of saying, hey, cybersecurity, this is important and all. Also, some other things that the boards can do is just, looking at their own systems. Most organizations have boards of directors, they have a board of director portal. I was called into one of our companies because the board of directors said, how secure is our portal? And I was like, what are you doing in here? It's like, well, it's just where we meet and we discuss things, but is that secure? And we found out that actually was hanging off of their intranet of the company, and we discovered several problems. I'm not going to say they were major, but there are issues. And they were like, well, okay, if this is hanging off of our intranet, we have these problems. What other problems does our intranet have? So now again, we're seeing this is all hands on deck. At that organization, the marketing department was in charge of the intranet, and IT was not really involved.
Mhm.
But because the board said, hey, we have these holes in our side of the portal, we know the intranet is affected. Hey, marketing guys, you're not IT people. Yet you have great web developers and content people, but now we get to bring in the IT security people to make sure that this intranet is working. And again, that one little task lit the light bulb, if you will, for the rest of the organization to say, hey, the board's really concerned about cybersecurity.
KTL is a Microsoft Gold partner and a CMMC registered provider organization. Their professional team members represent a variety of backgrounds and industries that will map out and guide you on your road to CMMC compliance. The process starts with a dedicated team of CMMC registered practitioners who understand your specific requirements and are here to help every step of the way. KTL Solutions, delivering tailored solutions so you get the most out of your technology. Visit them today at ktlsolutions.com.
And speaking of portals, ever since COVID, when everybody got sent home, a lot of us are doing business differently and logging into things differently and having these communications. So that's a good point to bring up, that everybody should take a look and make sure that where they are communicating, that it is very, very secure. So that's a good little added bonus for the video. Okay. Are there any legal obligations? This is a good question. Legal obligations boards have when it comes to cybersecurity.
Okay, so I'm not a lawyer. Let me say that for you.
I'm not either.
I stayed at Holiday Inn Express last night. But when you look at the board and what they are responsible for, there could be, I should say that, there could be cases where investors, shareholders, the public could go after the board, right? I was married to a lawyer, And I remember one of the things she said is, yeah, when we sue people, we sue everybody.
Yeah.
They cast a really big net and they try to get everybody involved. So if there's a breach, if there is something that happens, guess what? That board of directors is going to get a letter that says, hey, there's legal action against you. Now, here's something that's very interesting, and it's been talked about a lot. But when CMMC 2.0 came out on November 4th, you may remember, Dana, it said in there, you have to log into the supplier performance risk system, right, that DoD runs. And they required a letter coming from a senior executive in the organization or a board member. Now, that hasn't really changed. I think that's always been like that when it came to this. They wanted somebody senior to write that letter saying we're in compliance. But the other thing that happened was last year, DOJ stood up a cybersecurity unit where they are there to prosecute for cybersecurity crimes. Now, if you remember too, with the NIST with the CMMC 2.0, they also mentioned False Claims Act. Again, nothing new. False Claims Act has been around since 1865. It was edited or revised in 1985. So it's not like this is new legislation, but I just thought it was very interesting that they pointed out that, yeah, we want somebody senior or a board member. Also, False Claims Act. And I knew about the DOJ thing, and I was like, oh my goodness. What happens if you are a DoD contractor? Let's say the self-assessment has occurred, and you said, yes, we are level 1 or even level 2 under the bifurcated standards, and there is a breach. I would imagine, and again, I don't work for DoD either, but I would imagine DoD is going to say, okay, you had a breach. We need to do an autopsy to figure out what happened. Because, they're like, hey, you're part of the supply chain. You're a DIB. We got to figure out what's happening. And we also know CMMC is there to share information. So here's a hypothetical for you. DoD comes in, they do their search. They say, oh, here's where the problem was, and here's the chain of events that occurred. And then they go back to your SBRS filing. So wait a second. You got breached. We just followed the chain of command or the chain of the actions. And based on what you said, this should not have occurred. If you had done X, Y, and Z, this should not have occurred. Oh, who signed that letter? Now, again, I'm speaking totally hypothetical, but what's to stop DoD to say, hey, we're going to send this over to DOJ. And we're not only going to just pull your contract, but we also are going to go back to the fault. You lied to us. You were breached. Here's the proof that you lied to us. And go after you civilly and maybe even criminally. Now, go after a company criminally, nothing really happens. But keep in mind that the director signed that letter. So again, where the directors are looking at like, oh, whoa, before you make me sign that, I might want to have a third party come in. I might want to have a outside source come in and make sure that everything you're telling me is right before I put my John Hancock on that letter.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the board of director that's signing it, who is probably not an IT person, is signing off that we're following all this protocol and these policies and whatever. And whoever puts their Hancock on that line is really, right now they're supposed to be doing self-attestation anyway, but supposedly it's going to be more serious now that it's CMMC. So everybody, thinks, oh, it doesn't matter. I just have to do self-assess myself. Yeah, but then somebody's got to sign this. And there's been a lot of talk about the False Claims Act now all of a sudden coming back to life here, like it kind of sat in the back for a little bit. But that's a very, very good point, that no one's going to want to be the one that just goes, oh yeah, sure, we passed the self-assessment and signed, because the chances of a cyber attack, they're very high, unfortunately. And if something does happen, that's when everything, like you said, the autopsy happens.
Yeah.
So that's an excellent point to bring up. Excellent. So I'm glad we talked about that. So this was really, really good. So is there anything else you want to throw out there before we go?
CMMC 2.0, I know when I talk to other assessors and other companies, they talk about, oh my gosh, we're going back to what we had before and people aren't going to do the thing. But it's interesting, when you read through the DoD documentation, they actually said, we expect DIB members to be honest. They're basically saying, look, we're going to expect this from you. Now, they've put some more things in there, like, False Claims Act, getting that signature from the senior person. Also, you have to keep in mind of the other parts of what's happening in the government. The DOJ setting up that cyber crimes unit, which could be the ones that they might use as their legal authority. So I believe that, what we're going to see is more honesty coming out of the NIST 800-171, using that standard for level ones and level twos, well, the bifurcated level twos that qualify. But also, because of the heightened awareness of cybersecurity, a lot of the board of directors, and when it comes to corporate governance, this isn't something that's just check the box, make sure we keep our money coming. Now they're really looking at it because they have a vested interest. They have skin in the game now to make sure that everything is happening. And I would encourage anybody who is on a board of directors, or if you're senior leadership at an organization, yes, trust your IT department, trust your cybersec department. That's why you hired them. But it never hurts to get a third party to come in there and take a look too. Just to glance over things, say, look, from the outside looking in, this is what I'm seeing and all. And it's going to be very interesting because I have a lot of scenarios in my head of seeing what's going to happen with CMMC 2, 3, 5 years down the road when they implement it and all. But here's something else to think about with the self-attestation that they're allowing for level 1 and some of the level 2 contracts. We have the CMMC AB who's been actively recruiting and trying to qualify the C3PAOs. And we know that with this big change, there's been a big talk about, it went from 300,000 to maybe 1,000 companies are going to need actual third-party assessment, right? But I was like, well, yeah, that could happen. But now DoD may have a avenue to do more cybersecurity audits.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at the Build Back Better plan and the other plans that the current administration's put in place, they have put in place, in one of them, there's like $1 billion they put in there for cybersecurity, which I'm pretty sure DoD could say, you know what, we want to use that money to have more cybersecurity assessments. So for any company out there that's doing their CMMC level 1 and you're going through that NIST 800-171 checklist, you might want to really look into that, because it would be very terrible if, let's say, for instance, you did say, yes, we're level 1 and you got this FCI contract, and they say, you know what, we're going to send ABC company to do an audit of you. And if it doesn't show up right, we might give you 30 or 60 days to fix it. But if you can't fix it in time, we might pull it. And by the way, meet our big brother or our little brother, DOJ.
And that we need what this all comes down to is we need to do this to protect our country and our information and things that are being stolen right now. It's not a matter of, well, I don't know, should we protect it? Should we not? We have to start doing this. We know we're victims of lots of stolen stuff, and it's only going to get worse. So we're not going to get less digital as we move forward in time. It's only going to be more digital. So this is a good framework to start with. And I think you're right. I think it's definitely going to be going more down the road. And, with that money, they've dedicated a lot of money towards this, which is good to hear, because we need to really start throwing more, not just throwing more money at it, but throwing more attention at it and, processes and procedures. So
very true.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And your expertise.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here. And I wanted to talk to you forever, Dana, but finally I got
Hey, and here we are. Yay. We'll have to do another video together.
Okay.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of 123 CMMC. Bye-bye.